So if you know me, you know that I'm a big fan of coffee mugs. If you've ever been to my house or in my office, you know that I have shelves that are just like full of some crazy mugs, some just plain mugs, some funny mugs, but just a lot of coffee mugs. I love coffee mugs. So this hurt. Like, have you ever like a parent go to discipline you and they use that like the old saying of like, this is gonna hurt me more than it hurts you? That's for one, I feel like that's a total lie. But that's kind of how I felt doing this. This kind of broke my heart a little bit. I might have cried just a little bit as I was cleaning it up. And, there's going to be a memorial service held later. Not really. But here's the deal. This was a perfectly good coffee mug, right? I mean, it worked. It held coffee. It held water, hot chocolate, whatever you want to put it in it, cider. It worked well. Everything was going great, and then somebody had the bright idea to take a hammer to it. And now we're left with pieces of a mug that I think somehow fit together, but it's going to take a little bit of work to make this work again. It's kind of like an interesting puzzle. But if you've been joining us for the last couple weeks, you know that we're in a series called The Rescue. And so far, the very first week at First Sunday, we talked about how, really this idea of the gospel. We've talked a lot about the gospel, and you hopefully know by now that, it's not just a part of your life that you kind of say a prayer once, or you hear this message, you hear the gospel message, and then it's like, oh, okay, cool, I prayed a prayer, and now we're done, this is over with, I don't have to worry about it anymore. But instead, the gospel is something that should actually be going consistently throughout our lives. It's something that should be impacting the decisions we make and just the way that we go about our day-to-day life for the rest of our life. Ooh, another fit. And then, in our small groups, we move into the creation story. And with that creation story, we first saw that in 5 days, God created the heavens, the earth, all of the plants and animals that we see around us, and it was good. And then the next week, we looked at how God created man. God created us. And we learned that we were created on purpose with a purpose. God didn't just kind of make us by accident. We didn't just like randomly show up and God's like, oh, okay, I guess we'll do what we got to do. But no, like we were created with a purpose, on purpose. So you have a purpose in your life. And then last week, I guess technically 2 weeks ago, because we had to cancel First Sunday. But 2 weeks ago, we then talked about the fall. And this is where God had made this perfect earth. He had made people, he had made all of this stuff and said it was good. But then Adam and Eve, once the serpent, which is Satan, gets involved, they sin. And once they sin, all of a sudden this perfect creation was in some ways ruined. Sin entered into the world, and all of a sudden there was brokenness. Kind of like this coffee mug that I'm trying to piece back together right now. This good, perfect, functioning creation was broken. If you look in Romans chapter 5, verse 12, it says, when Adam sinned, sin entered the world. Adam's sin brought death, so death spread to everyone, for everyone sinned. A guy named Paul is the one that wrote this book to the church in Rome, the Jews in Rome. And what he was trying to tell them with this is whenever you look all the way back at creation, whenever Adam and Eve sinned, this idea of sin, this idea of anything that goes against God's plan, God's will, enters into the world. This beautiful creation is now broken. It's messed up, and it's in need of fixing. And the reality is, if we look at the world around us right now, we see lots of brokenness. I mean, you can look at all the crazy politics, all that fun stuff that's happening right now. You can look at the crazy stuff that happened this summer. You can look at the coronavirus and COVID and the impact that that's had on the world around us. It's not that hard to see that there is a lot of brokenness in our world. And maybe even if you look at yourself, you look within your own home, it's kind of become normal this day and age, like for divorces to happen. At one point marriage was viewed as this like lifetime commitment, but now marriage is more of like, hey, as long as you keep me happy, we'll just make that work. And unfortunately, because people are taking that sort of view of it, the divorces happen, homes are broken, and now many of you and many students, high schoolers, middle schoolers, and even younger kids are growing up in homes with, instead of a mother and a father, they're growing up with just a mother or just a father, or maybe they're getting bounced around. And it creates hurt. As normal as we might try to make it seem, this brokenness, this broken marriage, these broken relationships create hurt. And so what do we do about that? What do we do about this hurt, this brokenness? I know for a lot of us it weighs heavy. And for a lot of us, we do our best to fix it. Within our own abilities, like maybe we try to smooth over relationships, or maybe if you do live in a broken home, maybe you try to, get in between any conflict between your mom and dad or whatever, and you do what you can just to stay out of the way and lay low and not cause more conflict. But the reality is sometimes that hurts you worse, and you kind of find yourself feeling all this pain, but you can't talk about the pain, the brokenness you're feeling, because you feel like it's just going to make things worse. We just live in this broken cycle, and as hard as we try to fix it ourselves, it ends up looking a little bit like this. Because the reality is, I haven't gotten to these little pieces yet, but as much as we try on our own, as much as we try to fix the brokenness in the world on our own, the reality is all we're doing is trying to tape together a broken mug. If I keep going like this mug is never going to hold a coffee again, which is super sad. It's never going to achieve its purpose. As much as I may try to get all these pieces to stick back together, as much tape as I might use, it's never going to look like what it was supposed to look like. It's never going to fulfill the purpose that it was supposed to have. And for us, as long as we keep trying on our own to fix the brokenness that we see, we're never going to be able to fulfill the purpose that God created us and called us to. So this week, I'll be honest, this is kind of a heavy week. This is a week where we're not necessarily going to talk about all like happy sunshine and rainbows and unicorns or whatever. This is a week where we're going to talk about brokenness. This is a week where we're going to talk about the pain, the broken things that we see in the world and why they are the way that they are. But here's what I want you to know. It gets better. Just because we're not able to fix the hurt and the pain that we see on our own doesn't mean that it can't be fixed. Just because this broken mug can never be taped together to look like it once did doesn't mean that it can't be made new. There's hope that's coming, but sometimes before we realize that we need to be fixed, we have to realize how broken we are. So this week as we talk in our small groups, I want to encourage you. I know it's going to be uncomfortable. I know it's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult, but I want to encourage you to ask those hard questions, to take a look at yourself and recognize brokenness that is there in your life, or the brokenness that's there in the world around us, because we need to recognize the brokenness to realize that we need to be fixed. We need to see the hurt and pain and acknowledge that it's there before we can realize that we need to bring in a doctor to fix it, before we realize that we need to bring in somebody that knows more than we do to fix it. But the thing that I want you to hear that brings hope is that unlike me with this mess of a mug, there is somebody that can fix the brokenness in this world. There is somebody that can fix the brokenness in your life. So know that hope is coming. But for this week, let's dig into the brokenness. Let's take a hard look at ourselves and admit that we need rescued.